hail, and welcome back to my channel, or if it's your first time here, welcome especially. I'm Sally, and I'm so glad you stopped by. Today I am getting ready to go to the grocery store, but first I want to share by popular request my top 10 tips for how to save money and eat well, how to purchase foods that are high quality, that are well sourced, nutrient dense, in line with a pro-metabolic lifestyle without totally breaking the bank. Before we dive into that though, just a reminder that slots are now open for nutritional therapy. I have all different kinds of options so that there is one for everybody. If you want to book your free consultation, no strings attached, you can just shoot me an email or apply through my website, which is linked down below. And of course, Basics, a pro-metabolic starter guide, which is going to give you a step-by-step guide to blood sugar regulation, inflammation management, and how to get your nutrient needs met through food and targeted supplementation, along with over 20 recipes and a week-long meal plan, is also live and available for you. So go check that out. Okay, enough of me blabbering. Let's get into point number 1, which is to meal plan. You cannot stay on budget and get everything you need if you do not have a plan. And it doesn't have to be that you have every single meal planned out to the T, in the sense of you know exactly how you're going to season it, what of the pantry staples you already keep on hand you're going to use. But depending on how you kind of like to structure your week, depending on the staples you have on hand, at least figure out how many proteins you need, how many carbohydrates you need to accompany those, how many fresh fruits and vegetables approximately you need to have. And of course we want to factor in snacks, because one of the biggest mistakes I would make early on, when I just gotten married and was meal planning for both me and my husband, is I would try to be almost too frugal with it and think, oh, we don't need any snacks, we don't need anything fun, we don't need anything like that. But then we would get really hungry and not have enough food in the middle of the week, or just be sick of what we had on hand. And then we kind of go out last minute either to a restaurant or run to the grocery store and actually end up spending more money that way. So factor those snacks, factor some treats into the equation, and make a plan. Point number 2 is to prioritize. What I mean by this is make a list of the foods that are most important to you to get at the highest quality possible, and essentially what quality that is, what your threshold is, so to say, as well as the foods that you're willing to compromise on. Because most people, myself included, if you're watching my videos, I imagine you probably fall into the same camp. We can't afford to buy everything at optimal quality. And so again, it's just really helpful to have a plan going into it. So for my own family, I prioritize grass-fed beef, grass-finished beef, and raw milk. Of course, grass-fed milk as well. And I've done a lot of research in terms of what these animals might be supplemented with if they don't have enough, if the pastures need a little bit of help essentially. And I know for myself, okay, what am I good with these animals being supplemented with, what am I not, because there is some more nuance to it. So I encourage you to do your own research on that. But all that goes to say, it's grass-fed beef and it is grass-fed raw milk. Those are my top 2 priorities. One thing that I compromise on is going to be chicken. So I will buy more conventionally raised chicken so that I can afford to get the more expensive beef and the more expensive dairy. And the reason that I have prioritized these this way is that you notice more of a difference when it comes to the fat content that is in beef. There's more of a negative effect when you get the conventionally raised beef than there is if you get conventionally raised chicken, and we tend to stick to pretty lean chicken just per my husband's preference. And so we focus on getting those really high quality fat sources through raw milk and through grass-fed dairy. But just make a list of priorities, what you're willing to compromise on, and understand that'll probably change with time. I hope there's a point where I can buy all of our meat at the quality that I want to, but we're not quite there yet, and that is totally fine. Okay, point number 3 is to keep it simple. You can go a long way with high quality proteins and root vegetables, for instance, or high quality proteins and fruit. It can be tempting to try in one week like a bunch of complicated recipes that have all these different kind of more obscure ingredients, but that is a really good way to have ingredient prices adding up really quick. So if you keep things like potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, carrots, like anything like that on hand, those are pretty cheap. All of them are pretty cheap, and that gives you margin to then spend more money on your proteins, which tend to be more expensive. Well, which are always more expensive, especially when you're buying them at a higher quality. So keep it simple. And then what we will do is often like once or twice a week, we will have a more complex or new recipe that we want to try that might require, purchasing some more obscure ingredients, so to say. And we will throw that into the mix again, like once or twice a week, just to keep things fun and keep things fresh. But again, we plan for it. So point number 4, hold on, I need a sip of my coffee. Wait, does anybody else take their mug in the car with them like all the time? Because I posted a picture of the gym with my mug the other day. Someone asked me if I drove with it. And I thought it was so funny because I drive with a mug all the time, or I'll sit in the passenger seat and my husband will drive and I'll hold it. But I guess it is a little risky. So let me know in the comments if you drive with a mug. But point number four is to maintain flexibility. My phone is down here and that's what I'm just tracking with, if you're wondering why I keep looking down. But maintain flexibility. So have a plan, but when you go to the grocery store or when you go to the farmer's market, look to see what's on special. And even if it's something that's about to expire, that's great. Just grab that meat, throw it in the freezer if you're not going to cook it right away, and you'll have it for later. But maintain flexibility when it comes to your proteins especially, and your produce, but kind of have a template for how you structure those meals, so that you are then able to take advantage of a deal if you see one. Okay, next point, number 5, is to go for less desirable cuts of meat. And what I'm thinking of primarily when I say this is, instead of going for a chuck roast, for instance, you could go for something like a London broil or an eye of round or a rump roast. All of these are a little bit leaner and they tend to be tougher than that chuck roast. And if you don't know how to cook them, they can end up, tough and dry. However, when you kind of learn how to finesse them, they are absolutely delicious, and you honestly get more bang for your buck, at least in terms of protein, because sometimes with a chuck roast, for instance, while that fat is still nourishing and while it adds nice flavor and moisture, there's a lot of it that just kind of melts away as you're cooking it, and so you don't get nearly as much meat as you think you do when you first buy it. So again, I'll look for things like a rump roast, an eye of round, or a London broil, and I will throw them in my pressure cooker. I actually have my favorite pressure cooker roast recipe in Basics, if you're interested in that. But you can also braise them, you can also throw them into stew. All of those are great options. Kind of in that same vein, point number 6 is to incorporate organ meats. And I know this is a little tricky because they don't always taste the best, but even if you think about using them to bulk up your other meals, and for instance, you buy, this is maybe kind of a silly example, but or an over-the-top example, but for easy math, say you buy 2 pounds of ground beef instead of 3 pounds of ground beef, and then you buy 1 pound of liver that you then add in, that liver is generally going to be a lot cheaper than regular ground beef, and it's adding a lot of nutrients to your meals. So you can just throw that in, bulk it up. You can make liver mush like I have in Basics, or liver chili, where you're supplementing with those organ meats. It's saving you money, and you're getting all the wonderful nutrients from it. Number 7 is to know your grocery store. So don't be afraid to shop around. And it might take you a little extra time. It will take you a little extra time if you're not totally familiar with your grocery stores already. And it might take you a little bit of extra time each week if you have to go to multiple grocery stores. But if you're at a point where you have a little bit of extra time, but you don't have the extra money, then it is worth it. But I know for myself that at Costco or at Walmart, I can get the cheapest grass-fed ground beef. At Trader Joe's, I can generally get the best produce that I want, and I know where to get my eggs, I know where I get my raw dairy, and sometimes that means I go to 3 or 4 places in a day or throughout the week, but I have a plan, I carve it out, and I can still get it done in an hour or an hour and a half. So don't be afraid to shop around and know your grocery store. Tip number 8 is to buy for multiple weeks. Now, I realize this can get a little tricky because budget can blur together from week to week, so just make sure that you are keeping track of it. But oftentimes if you buy your meat more in bulk, or we'll sometimes buy a massive pork roast or pork loin that we'll eat over 2 weeks, we'll cut it in half, we'll freeze 1/2 of it, and we save money as opposed to if we had just bought enough meat for the 1 week and then next week. You can sometimes get better deals from buying more at one time. So definitely try that. And then tip number 9, which I only have 9 tips. I don't know why I said I had 10, but tip number 9 is to make what you can from scratch. And there is the process of kind of building up your pantry, which can take time. But for instance, if you are baking your own bread, which is so easy, even sourdough bread is so easy, but even if you're not starting with that, baking your own bread, not only are you getting more nutritional value, but it is so much cheaper and so much tastier than if you're buying bread, especially high quality bread from the grocery store. This can be said for just about anything. I know, like at home we make our own mayonnaise, and we make PUFA-free mayonnaise. So I make it with avocado oil. This recipe is also, of course, in the starter guide, but I make it with avocado oil. And if you were to compare that to any store-bought mayonnaise made with 100% avocado oil, it is so much cheaper. So make what you can from scratch, and it will taste better. It will most likely be more nutritious, and it will most likely be cheaper. So those are all my tips. I want to say thank you so much to everyone who has already reached out about booking a consultation and who has already purchased the starter guide. Please let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns down below. Until next time, bye y'all.